My own pediatrician laughed me out of the office. Every single doctor I tried to call wouldn't even take my call. I would get through to a nurse. They would say, I'll pass on your message. Crickets. So I was kind of at my wit's end. I didn't want to just start dosing up my child without knowing anything. So beautiful serendipity. Got this email, contacted the doctor at Children's Hospital. She listened to me. I brought her my research paper. We started megadosing my kiddo. Within 2 weeks, she started putting together little sentences.
With the vitamin E, and was there fish oil?
And fish oil. Yep.
Those two.
Those two things. Literally, that's it.
Hey, I'm Brooke Jean, therapist, recovering perfectionist, and struggling working mom on a mission to normalize normal. If you're an overwhelmed, high-achieving, and secretly anxious mama, struggling to balance it all and on the brink of burnout, you are in the right place. Here is where we talk about hard things like balancing work and family life, mental health, and how to navigate life-altering transitions. Nothing is too taboo here. In my conversations, I'll teach you how to let go of who you think you're supposed to be in order to create the life you've always wanted. Get ready to embrace your messy, shed the shoulds, and find freedom through a life unperfected. This is the Unperfected Pod.
Welcome back, Mama. I am so grateful that you are here and that you are tuning into this conversation. I just had the opportunity to have a conversation with a friend of mine, Christine MacCarroll. She's a functional nutritionist who found purpose in her pain as she had her 2-year-old daughter go from verbal to unverbal and realized she was able to help her daughter overcome a neurological speech disorder using nutritional therapy. In this conversation, we cover it all. We cover what does it mean to be in perimenopause? What are the signs and symptoms that we're in perimenopause? How can we help ourselves navigate that high hormonal time? She's also late diagnosed ADHD. So we talk about the signs and symptoms of that and how so many girls are overlooked and undiagnosed in ADHD and how you can use functional nutrition as a real modality for treatment for those symptoms. We talk about progesterone and insulin sensitivity and detoxification and all of the supplements that we need to form these building blocks to help us feel good in our mind and body. So if you're on a journey to figure out late diagnosed ADHD, or you're on a journey to figure out your brain fog or your stress hormones or your low energy, this is definitely a great conversation for you. I hope you enjoy. Welcome back to the Unperfected Pod, where we normalize normal and find freedom through a life unperfected. Hello, mamas. I'm Brooke Jean, your host, and I am so excited to invite Miss Christine MacCarroll. Am I saying that correctly?
MacCarroll. Yeah, you got it.
MacCarroll. No, I want to make sure I say it right. MacCarroll.
MacCarroll, yep.
Podcast. And let me read her bio to you guys so you know exactly who we're dealing with here and who we're talking to. So Christine is a functional nutritionist, board certified in holistic nutrition, and a certified brain health professional. Is that through Dr. Daniel Amen?
Amen Clinics, yeah.
Oh, so good. So cool that you have that. Okay. She's also a woman with late diagnosed ADHD and a mom to a daughter with ADHD. After helping her then 2-year-old daughter overcome a neurological speech disorder using nutritional therapy, she realized the assembly line style, one-size-fits-all, pill for every ill model of modern healthcare was better suited for factories than families. Sadly, most doctors have little to no training on true healing, so she rebelled and has helped hundreds of women recover mood, energy, and mojo, putting autoimmune diseases into remission, slaying period problems, and clearing up brain fog and ADHD symptoms along the way. Christine is also the creator and host of the top-ranked podcast, The Bitch Fix, Health and Hormones for the Modern Woman, where she interviews experts and shares her no BS views on all things women health. Christine, thank you so much for being here today.
Yay, it's so good to connect with you, Brooke.
In your bio, there's at least 14 things that jump out at me that I know the listeners want to talk about, like slaying period problems and mood and energy and ADHD. So I'm so excited to get started. But I always like to begin, with your story. And you allude to it in your bio with your 2-year-old daughter. So tell us a little bit about your journey and how you became interested in functional nutrition in the first place.
Yeah. I think a lot of people have a personal story that brings them into like some sort of health world. So my daughter was diagnosed with something called apraxia. And essentially, what that means is that there's a disconnect between the brain and the mouth. And she could think in words. She had understanding of words. There was no cognitive problem, but she couldn't say her words. And the diagnosis came after she had started losing her words, which was a terrifying thing for me to witness as a mom. So one day she's walking around. I still remember the weekend. It was like so clear. She was walking around the house saying, hi, 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 all weekend. And then Monday could not say hi anymore.
Oh my God, I can't even
So
imagine. I cannot
yeah,
even
and
imagine.
I'm only glad that she was my second because I didn't know what the hell I was doing with my first one. And I trusted anything anybody told me. And I listened to everybody's opinion because I didn't know any better. And I didn't trust my mama gut very much. But by the time you get a second one, you're like, yeah, like I feel like I know some things. And I've also seen one of them like develop in the way that they're supposed to. So it's like something is not right here. Went through the process of getting that diagnosis and they tested everything. Like they tested hearing and sight and occupational therapy stuff. And like, was she on the spectrum and like all the things? And this was the diagnosis. And we had like Children's Hospital. We had the early intervention program here in Colorado where it's like through the schools, but it's an independent thing. And at that point, zero additional information, like not even a piece of paper to walk out of that appointment with. Like it was just like, good luck. And they said, go make an appointment for speech therapy after they like sat us down, gave us this diagnosis. And like, that was it. The wait for speech therapy was 2 months. And I didn't have any reference point for what was going on with my kid. So of course I asked Google, as we do. So I landed in chat rooms with parents, which thank God really for other parents, right? Like even when we have good information, we need a support. So I'm in chat rooms with other parents and I'm seeing families who have teenagers who can still say fewer than 10 words. I thought we were going to get into speech therapy. This problem is going to be solved. No big deal. No, it's like you do a speech therapy so you can maintain and maybe grab a few more words, but it's the language part as far as conventional medicine is not really like you're not really making big progress.
Wow.
So I was, of course, really distraught. I couldn't imagine, like to me, I imagined it as being like in jail in your head. So you understand everything people are telling you. You know what you want to say. Language is happening in your brain and you can't get those words out.
What was her behavior during that? Was she so frustrated? Like, because I know when, can you imagine, right? Can you imagine you have your feelings and you have your thoughts and you can't express them? Behaviorally, what was going on for this peanut?
Yeah, that's a great question. She wasn't quite to the point of getting frustrated. I could start to see a little bit, starting to come out. We had actually, just because I thought it would be fun, started teaching her sign language beforehand. Like just in the interim, even before the diagnosis. And then once we got the diagnosis, I was like, I got the sign language DVDs. I was like, we're all in on this. Because for a while, I was like, well, this is the only strategy I have. I'm going to have to teach our family sign language. So I think it actually mitigated her frustration a little bit that she was able to communicate. But what she was making, like the sounds she was making, I called them her cave girl sounds. Like she didn't make sounds that sounded like they were going to become words. So it was like, like just kind of walking around making these grunty noises. So she could like vocalize, but it didn't sound like it was going to be words. And so she did start learning some sign language. It's funny, like every once in a while we like play around and we still know like a few signs. We've forgotten a lot of them. But yeah, so that was what I was doing. I was waiting for speech therapy. We were trying to start to play around with sign language because I don't know what else to do. And I started trying to figure it out. I just was like, I was unconvinced that there were not other answers. And I was unconvinced that the only thing I could do was this one speech therapy. And being trapped in her head for her whole life sounded like a terrible plan. So I just started doing a bunch of research. And mind you, at this point, I had a whole other full-time job. So I was in corporate for years. So had my 40-hour-a-week corporate job. Meanwhile, I'm taking this kiddo to like the early intervention stuff. I have someone coming to the house and I'm staying up like half the night researching. So long story short, found some really interesting information after a couple months, some relatively smaller studies, but they've been done at Children's Hospital in California. And it was nutrition related. And it wasn't even that crazy. It was super high doses of vitamin E and fish oil. it really seemed, for some reason, promising to me. And I don't know what it was about that really landed for me versus some other things. So amazing serendipity around this time. I'm really interested in this. I start like trying to figure out what could be going on. There was a mom and what's so funny, like we think about Facebook groups now. When my kiddo, she's 13 now, when she was little, we had email threads. So I was in this like huge email thread of moms that I had never met who happened to have just delivered their babies at the same place that I had. So one of them said, hey, there's a doctor over at the Children's Hospital who's looking for moms who are breastfeeding because she's studying vitamin E. And it was one of those nutrients that I had seen identified in that study. I wasn't breastfeeding anymore, but I was like, hey, there's a doctor who is studying this. And I had been trying for months to get a doctor to talk to me. I skipped over that important part. My own pediatrician laughed me out of the office. Every single doctor I tried to call wouldn't even take my call. I would get through to a nurse. They would say, I'll pass on your message. Crickets. Would get either, no, we're absolutely not doing that, or no one talking to me. So I was kind of at my wit's end. I didn't want to just start dosing up my child without knowing anything. And I did know enough to like figure out like this actually could be a problem if I overdosed her and I didn't know what I was doing. So beautiful serendipity, got this email, contacted the doctor at Children's Hospital. She was willing to talk to me. Her nurse was lovely. She's like, I'm going to talk to her right now. Went and talked to her. She's like, we got an appointment for you next week. Like I was like already on cloud nine just because someone would talk to me.
Yes.
Go in there. She was amazing. She listened to me. I brought her my research paper. She actually like read it while I was sitting there.
Wow.
She asked me a ton of questions about my daughter and said like, I'm perfectly good with this. I want to go run baseline labs right now. She called down immediately to send us down to get labs done. And then like immediately called over to the pharmacist and was like, I think we want to do this. Does she need a special formulation from the pharmacy? Like just like took it and ran. And I found out later she was a mom of a special needs child. And I think that was really what opened her maybe to this conversation. But wow. So we got the green light. We did baseline blood work. I went and got out the nutrients I needed, and they were just stuff from like locally. I didn't have to get anything formulated. We started megadosing my kiddo. By the way, disclaimer here, I'm not suggesting anyone go megadose any kiddos with anything. Under supervision, we're megadosing my kid. Within 2 weeks, she started putting together little sentences. Like we're talking a kid who was like grunting into like putting together little like noun verb sentences.
Wow. With the vitamin E, and was there fish oil?
And fish oil. Yep.
Those two.
Those two things. Literally, that's it.
Oh my gosh.
So I was stunned.
I goosebumps because this mama intuition advocating for your child, another like moms connecting. Like I'm just like, this is the power of the mama energy. And I can't even imagine, what were you feeling?
I mean, I was like Alice down the rabbit hole, right? I was like, wait, what just happened to my kid? We had started her on some basic speech therapy at that point by the time we were like, down the road a few months and into this. And when she had actually been originally evaluated, she was in the 5th percentile for language. Mm-hmm. We did 5 months of this protocol. And at the end of that time, her speech therapist at Children's was like, we need to retest her because I kind of think she's done here. Like, I want everyone to know that the typical run is like, it's through high school. There's not like a done with speech therapy, right? So we're 5 months in. She's like, I think you're done. I was like, And I felt actually really unnerved at that point because they were kind of my lifeline. Like they were the only people who knew it was happening. She retested her. She was 95th percentile for speech and language.
What?
So then I was like, okay. So she's like, do you feel better now? And I said, yeah. And she said, you're done. So we never went back to speech therapy. Just completely cleared. Madeline like talks with my daughter. She like talks like nobody's business now. She like can't stop talking. And that really opened my eyes wide open to what can happen to our brains and bodies when we give them what they need. So couldn't unsee what I saw. And I decided that my life's work was to help other people feel better using tools that we have at our disposal.
Wow. I'm like speechless. That is, I don't know how I didn't know that part of your story, but that is just unbelievable. Unbelievable. Okay. So from that point, what is the treatment plan going forward? She's just growing and developing per all the other milestones that you would expect. And then what's also growing and percolating with your career and finding your purpose through this pain and all that stuff? What's happening after that?
Yeah. So she really did do fantastic. I think we kept her on the same like dosage for a couple, maybe like 2 more years. But I also did radically overhaul her diet at that point. So I, again, kind of power of moms, right? I was at a play date and I was kind of telling some of this story and it was very fresh. Like it was within the first 6 months after to another mom. And she's like, oh, I think you would really like this one organization. It's called the Weston A. Price Foundation. She's like, it's just about like real food and whole food. And so I started like learning about that. It was similarly life transforming, completely overhauled everything that we were doing with her diet. And then after a couple of years, I actually just started playing with lowering her supplementation and eventually kind of just weaned her off that super high amount. And she was fine and had retained all of her gains. I took about a year where I was like sitting with all of this and just like, it had been so intense to deal with and to process and to go through. But I knew that I needed to make this
Really, right?
change. Yeah.
Traumatizing.
It
Absolutely
was,
traumatizing for you as the mom who's just in fight mode, protecting and advocating for her baby. And then when everything's okay, I mean, most of us collapse. Did you have a collapse period?
oh, I totally did. Yeah. I can, this is how I jacked up my own hormones. It's like, I just put every single bit of energy into my kid. So it was like completely flat. Took me a little while to like kind of get back where I could be a little, just like normalized again. And then I decided I would go back to school. So I went back to get, my formal training. And then probably by the time she was, I guess around 4 or 5 was when I started, I formally opened my practice. So it's funny, a lot of people thought I would start working with kids because of my daughter's story, and it was way too close to home. It was much, much easier for me to talk to the women who had been like me, who had been like, maybe we've given everything to a kid or just other family or just life. We just, I think women do have I'm going to probably offend somebody, but like, I think we have a biological imperative that's like, we have a caregiving thing because we make the babies.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
lots of burned out mamas. And so I just started working with women from that point, and lots of women who had poured themselves out in different ways. Like, everyone has their own story. So that's who I started working with.
Wow. Okay, so for the mama who's new to the world of functional nutrition and all of
Mhm.
its magic and potential, can you give us kind of a basic run of what a functional nutritionist is and does, and some of the things that you've helped your women through, whether it's hormonal, and then we'll get to the ADHD as well.
Hmm. Yeah. So I think about it as just like, it is that word function. So are you functioning or are you not? And if something isn't functioning, we have to figure out why. So just like with my daughter, we were saying like the symptom is she isn't talking. There is a treatment, I'll air quote that, of like, okay, we can keep, just doing regular speech therapy, but I'm wondering about the underlying mechanism of why this is happening. So there's a field called functional medicine. Functional nutrition is just the like sister of functional medicine, which is just like if something's not functioning, there's probably a reason. And if we can figure out why, my big question, I'm a big questioner. If we can figure out why are things not functioning, we can start to repair from the root cause level. So for me, that involves looking at what's happening in somebody's body, right? So how are you eating? How are you sleeping? Are there problems with your gut? Are there problems with detoxification? Is there a genetic component? I do genetics now with every single client. Like, where is that initial breaking point so that we can start to support the body from there? And then I just think, like, it's not even me that's doing anything. It's that our own bodies want to be healed. Our own bodies want to be well. They're really good actually at compensating for a really long time. And so if we start to give them, again, kind of just like my daughter, if we give them what they need, they can do the repair work. We just have to know what's happening so that they can have what they need.
Hmm. And you do the repair work through nutrition. And is it also just lifestyle things as well? Like, because I know you look at sleep and just all the qualities that make our brain and body healthy and whole. What are some of the main things that you're looking at?
Yeah. So like I said, for a lot of people, I'm looking at it's called genomics, which is just the intersection of where the environment meets the genetics, because the genetics are the blueprint, but then there is our lifestyle that will impact whether those genes are turning on and off. And it may be something like you have really impaired detoxification. So any little load on your detoxification system means that your body is going to kind of be overloaded, and it's going to be really hard for you to, if you're not kind of taking out the trash, So to speak, it's going to be hard for your body to function well if you don't have the nutrients you need. So a few of the nutrients that are like really key that I always would say a woman with ADHD, for example, but really all women should have assessed, like zinc, vitamin D, iron. There's a really strong association with all of those nutrients and being more symptomatic. I look at things like thyroid function. Thyroid function is a huge one for women who have either energy problems, mood problems, even libido problems. It's really, really like under recognized how much of a player that is. Digestive function. So let's say you're eating a great diet, but your digestion isn't working very well. You actually can't extract the nutrients that you need for your brain and body to work. Yeah, if they don't have symptoms, if their system isn't working correctly, we might just not have access to the nutrients we need to run our bodies well. So just like my daughter needed a pretty heavy dose of vitamin E, we need to look at her omegas. Similarly, if people are having problems digesting fat, for example, or not getting access to protein, we're not going to have the building blocks. So I just think about it from the level of what are the building blocks our bodies need? What could be getting in the way of our body having access to those building blocks?
Okay. So let's speak directly to basically each other and the listener, right? The self-proclaimed middle-aged, busy working mama who is suffering all the things like the brain fog. We were talking, everybody, before we hit record, just being tired, right? The lack of energy or just not, it's the afternoon, so we are dwindling fast. Also, the libido one, I think, is a really big one that I hear women talking about, and just having different libidos in their partnerships and all the problems that can create. But somebody that's our age and they're coming to you with some of these main things like stress, energy, libido, weight gain, all of those things. What's the course of action that you take, or what are some things that you're finding that are hormonally based for somebody our age?
So one thing to recognize is things actually are changing at this point. And so like, we just have to be real with like, yes, things are changing.
Our bodies are changing. They're supposed to, right?
They're supposed to. Yeah. So like two big things that happen around the time that we hit our 40s. The first one is one of our hormones that helps us to stay sane. I think of it's our calming hormone, which is progesterone. Like if you look at a graph of this, it just falls off a cliff. It's like going along happily, and then you hit somewhere between 40 and 45, and it's like, just falls off a cliff, right? And it's like
explaining a lot, Christine.
Yeah, progesterone is like nature's Prozac, right? This is like what keeps you chill. So we start to get an uptick. Like it would be more common to have an uptick of like anxiety or sleeplessness. Sleeplessness is one of the first things that starts to show up because of that drop in progesterone. So that's one thing that's happening. One of the other things that's a major player is we do start to get naturally somewhat a little bit more insulin resistant as we get into perimenopause and menopause. So insulin is our blood sugar regulating hormone, and I call it one of the big dogs of hormone balance. So to your body, like estrogen, progesterone, even though they seem very important to us, to your body, they're actually the little dogs. The big dogs that run the show are your thyroid hormone, cortisol, which is stress, of course, but insulin, which is regulating blood sugar. So some of the things that have to do with energy, weight gain, even libido have to do with that insulin sensitivity. So I hate to say this, but we do have to be more mindful of sugar, carbs, processed foods around this time because we just don't respond as well. It's basically like the cells have their little like earmuffs on. They're not listening when insulin comes along and is like, hey, we got some sugar to deal with. They're like, I do not hear you. So the end result of that is we start to have like downstream other hormonal impacts, but also like midsection weight gain, other blood markers start to be out of balance, even things like thyroid, like we start to see the downstream effect of insulin resistance. So there's a whole bunch of other stuff, but like top two for almost every woman around this age is progesterone's falling off a cliff and we are getting a little bit insulin resistant.
Okay. So what you're saying is my low-key addiction to Cheez-Its is not helping my problems.
I am sorry to tell you. You probably want to hit the protein and not the Cheez-Its.
This is where, again, we need to lean into that radical acceptance, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I know it. I know the way my body feels in terms of energy and mood and clarity of mind when I do focus on a high protein. low sugar diet. And when I'm grabbing for the Cheez-Its, I know I'm just desperate for like a hit of anything, I'm
You're
not.
looking for the lighter fluid when you need to put a log on the fire.
That's right. That's right. That's right. That's
Mhm.
right. I just need to get the energy to get the love. Well, there goes that getting to the root of things, right?
Yep, totally.
Okay. So how do we know that we're entering or in perimenopause? I know everybody is dying to know more about perimenopause.
hmm So, unfortunately, what I'm going to tell you is there is not like a thing that's like line in the sand for sure you have this.
Right?
One of the big problems is even things that are measuring hormone levels, even if we're measuring estrogen, progesterone, other things like FSH, they fluctuate wildly during perimenopause. So 1 month you might look like you're perfectly normal. The next month it might look really low. If we measured you again a month later, it might even be something's looked high. And so you're not actually going to get a great read from blood work. And I'm someone who loves data, right? And so I'm all about all the data all the time, but it does actually end up being more about your symptoms. And I would even say just like basic blood work, like you're looking for your blood sugar markers, right? You're looking at some of those other like overall health markers, but just like, can I get an answer to, am I actually in perimenopause? It's pretty hard to like actually just be like, I took this blood test and I'm in perimenopause. We start to see those other symptoms, right? We start to see the midsection weight gain. We start to see sleep problems. We start to see actually an uptick in anxiety, feeling a little crabby, probably more of an up down between beginning of the month and end of the month than we might have felt before. So there's definitely times where you're feeling better. Typically, when we're just cycling normally and we're like in our most fertile years, the progesterone level is pretty high in the second half of your cycle, your nature's Prozac, right? And then when it falls off, what we start to see is again, like there's a much bigger shift between how you feel the first 2 weeks of your cycle and how you feel the last 2 weeks of your cycle. And those are really more of the signs and symptoms. As women get closer to menopause, they may get hot flashes, but lots of women don't even get hot flashes till much closer to menopause. But that perimenopause period can last for up to 10 years, which is a bitter pill. I know.
Well, and I feel like everything you just said is so relatable. The like all the symptoms that you're telling us to look out for, like I am hitting on all of those. And I could just feel the mamas being like, check, 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 check. Yep, those are all relatable. Okay, so what can we do? What can we do through functional nutrition or working with you to help us navigate this time, to help us just feel a little bit better through the ride?
So I'm going to tell you first just some like things that every woman I think should be doing. And then I'll tell you some things that I think would be good or like what I would assess if I was talking to someone one-on-one. So I think one of the things that every woman is like, because I've looked at thousands of food journals, every woman almost without fail is falling off the protein bus. And if you even look at trends over like population data, like what we have done as a society since like the 50s till now, as a society, our overall protein consumption is vastly lower. One of the other things I didn't mention, and this is just, I feel like I'm just like the bearer of bad news and I'm sorry, but one of the other things that happens around that like 40-year-old cliff is we start to lose muscle mass at a rapid rate. And muscle is your metabolically active tissue. It also helps with things like insulin resistance and it helps protect our bone health, which is one of the biggest things. So if you're not eating enough protein, you're not just giving your body enough of that primary building block to maintain your muscle mass. The other reason why it's really important is some people know what neurotransmitters are, but basically it's like the chemicals in your brain that help you to, feel things. A lot of people have seen the serotonin commercials, or they might even be on medication that alters serotonin. Neurotransmitters are built from protein. Like we break down protein into something called amino acids. Those amino acids get converted into neurotransmitters. If we don't have enough raw materials, if we don't have enough eggs, we cannot make the omelet, right? So when we're low on protein, we're also low on the raw materials to have good brain function. So now we can't really rebuild muscle. We're having some problems again with blood sugar regulation, and we don't even have the stuff to make our brains work well. So foundationally, I think just about every woman, unless she's like itty bitty bitty, probably bare minimum like 100 grams of protein a day. And I bet if anyone out there starts calculating, they are going to be shocked at how much lower they are than that number.
Close to that. Not even coming close to that.
And starting your day so that you don't want the Cheez-Its at 2 p.m. We want to be eating 30 grams, like about a third of that protein, like 30 grams at 8 a.m. We need a protein heavy breakfast. We do not need what everyone hits for breakfast, which is like the cornflakes and the waffles and cereal, right? Like that is like
Toast,
we have toast,
whatever carb our kid is eating, we're
the
eating
leftovers from your child's plate. Yeah.
the Lego waffle that, we also know our child shouldn't be eating, but they're picky eaters, so they have to eat something. That's what I'm eating.
Yep.
That's
Yeah.
not
So
healthy.
we're picking up leftovers. So your blood sugar is just regulated from the morning. And we are setting up like everything that happens. And I know it's terrible. I'm again, like, I'm just telling you like it is. So
We need the
the like
truth.
it is.
Tell the truth on the podcast. Okay? We
The
want
truth is
real
everything. Yeah. But everything that's happening in the afternoon and evening. And when we want happy hour, it's all based on what happened in the morning.
Mhm. Yes.
So if we didn't start out with good nutrients, if we didn't see sunshine, if we're like in crazy stress mode and all we did was drink a cup of coffee on an empty stomach and grab like a handful of your kid's cereal,
Mhm.
what you're setting up is that in the afternoon, you're going to feel like shit and you're going to be hitting the Cheez-Its and you're probably going to be wanting your glass of wine at 4 o'clock. And then you're probably going to be snacking while you eat dinner. And you definitely want the handful of chocolate while you're sitting there watching Netflix. Like we've just set up a cascade.
Yeah.
We just tipped the first domino. So if we keep the first domino up by just eating 30 grams of protein first thing in the morning, we're like going to already avoid so much of that downstream stuff.
And you know what's also like going to double down on that bad news from a neuroscience standpoint is by 2, 3, and 4, we've run out of cognitive fuel. We've run out of willpower. We've run out of being able to function and think or make any sort of conscious decisions for ourselves because we also started our morning looking at the news and being on social media and dripping all that dopamine and working, doing this cognitive work subconsciously. So it comes 2, 3, and 4. From a body standpoint, we're craving something. And then from a mental standpoint, we're craving something, but we don't have the tools to make the healthy, conscious choices. And this is why I get so frustrated when people are like, oh, it's portion control and it's this and it's that. And it's like, no, bitch, it's fucking complex and layered. Like it is everything we're talking about and other things too. And, we're learning this information to be empowered and to try to grow in our awareness and to try to help ourselves. But it's also okay to just do one little baby step at a time because it is overwhelming, but it's really hard to make healthy choices as a busy working mom in the evening and afternoon when you've depleted all your resources mentally, physically, and otherwise all day long. Mm-hmm. But gosh, 30 grams of protein at 8, that's hard. That is difficult. How do you get that in?
So for my clients, like I actually have, because it is so hard, it's like probably like the number one question when I start changing things for people. They're like, how do I possibly do it? Like I have like, guides for people on how to get enough protein and like high protein things. So for me personally, I am able to eat eggs. Unfortunately, eggs are a top allergen. I do fine with eggs. So I hit it pretty hard. I have a couple of whole eggs. I have egg whites. And then I usually do either like Canadian bacon or turkey bacon as like one kind of breakfast. I also happen to like salmon. So like smoked salmon is a great breakfast. So I'll do like a bunch of smoked salmon, sometimes a little bit of cottage cheese with that. And then like, some other things on the side, but that's the protein piece of it. You can doctor up some oatmeal with some protein powder. So if people like something like more traditional breakfasty, there are high protein oats, which is not my very favorite thing because some people can't digest it, but it's okay. So I don't remember the brand name, but if you just Googled high protein oats and you put like a scoop of protein powder in, that works. I'm down with smoothies. It is one of the easiest things for most busy moms to do is just get some whey protein. Whey is the most bioavailable protein. Get something that's not flavored, put your own flavoring in so you don't get all the junk that comes along with it. But it's pretty easy actually in a smoothie to hit 30 grams of protein because you just like throw it in with your protein powder and you could put other good stuff in there too. The biggest thing I would say not to do with a smoothie is just don't dump a bunch of sweet things in there, right? Like don't make this like, 30 grams of protein and 100 grams of sugar. We have to actually be mindful of what else is going in that smoothie.
It's like
but those are like some easy things.
Smoothie. It's like, like she knows, you guys. And I'm like, it's a peanut butter and jelly smoothie.
Mm-hmm. But since I called it smoothie, it's definitely good.
It's got like all the things that basically make an ice cream sundae, and I call it a protein shake.
But there's protein in there too. For people who can do dairy, yogurt, like Greek yogurt is another super high protein. Probably you need to eat more than you think. But if you handle dairy fine, Greek yogurt's a great high protein breakfast too.
Okay. Okay, so none of us are eating enough protein, and that is a tough pill to swallow, but it is the truth. This is not the first time you or I or anyone listening has heard that. We have heard that, but we are giving you the science behind the why. It's not a fad, it's not a diet. It is a building block, like you said. Gosh, and I've heard that before about the amino acid and the neurotransmitters, but I've forgotten. So that's really important. And I'm sure that ties into your interest in getting brain health certified. Like everyone wants more serotonin, right? When we're feeling depressed, it's because we're not getting enough serotonin, and just understanding the implication of a low protein or high protein diet to those amino acids and therefore those neurotransmitters, AKA the serotonin, AKA the feel good hormone. Like, fuck, I need to
Yeah.
eat more protein to help me feel better, not just from like a muscle mass standpoint, which by the way is also relatable. I'm like, I have always been like thick, muscular, like muscles underneath my fat. I'm like, listen, bitch, if you could see how muscular I am underneath my wine and Cheez-Its, you'd be really
Yeah.
impressed. As I've gotten older, I've actually lost a little bit of weight trying to mindfully eat since last December. All my muscles are gone, and like it's something I used to be so proud of. I was like pretty strong girl, pretty muscular. Like I get it from my dad. He's this like short, stout Portuguese man. And I'm like, okay, well, that's annoying. You know, I'm like dropping some weight, but it's like floppy skin, and now I have to like lift
Yeah.
weights and eat. I guess I need to eat more protein. Anyways, okay, we can move on past the protein thing. It's
It's
relatable.
huge.
It's
Yeah.
huge, huge. Anything else that you're like, I wish every woman knew this or took this seriously in order for them to feel good or better?
Yeah. So I literally say these words to every client. This is my 3 Ps: protein, produce, and probiotics. If you make sure that those are in your day every day, like you are 9/10 of the way there. So if we're getting enough protein, produce, fruits, and vegetables, again, like people heard that way before they ever like really start. Like I think the protein conversation has gotten some steam, which I'm glad about, but everyone knows like I'm supposed to eat fruits of it. You really do need the vitamins and minerals, right? So that, and then probiotics are the things that help your gut be happy, but also, again, speaking to serotonin, 90% of your serotonin is made in your gut. So we need good, healthy gut function, and we need those microbes in the gut to be able to actually produce that serotonin for us, but also helps with about 1,000 other things. But if we were just looking at a plate, I tell every person protein, produce, probiotics, and then like we were talking about lifestyle stuff. Sleep is like just pretty much mission critical for everyone. But especially as we're getting older, our brain is doing its detox work at night. Our body is doing its detox work at night. If we are not giving our bodies the rest that they need, it's like you just keep putting dishes in the sink and you never do the dishes, right? Like we need that time. Our bodies need that time to do that cleanup and repair work. And so you're constantly going to be running behind, like physiologically, if you don't give yourself that time to do the cleanup and repair work.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Sleep. We could do a whole separate 45-minute podcast on sleep.
Just don't sleep.
Okay.
Totally.
And so quickly, the probiotics showing up on the plates. Like I'm familiar with taking a live probiotic pill, but what's a good probiotic on the plate that we can maybe start into the mix?
Yeah, cultured and fermented foods. So, I did say yogurt. Commercial yogurts, unfortunately, they're fairly dead. They don't have a lot of good stuff. There are some great ones. I'll tell you my two very favorite brands are two coconut-based yogurts. One of them is called Cocoyo and one of them is called Coconut Colts. They are both a little pricey, but they pack a big punch, which is why I like them. They both have pretty much per serving as much probiotic beneficial bacteria as a supplement, but we get better diversity and better response from our bodies when we're getting it from food. So coconut Colt, and I almost hate saying it because it's literally always sold out at the one store near me that sells it. So I'm like, don't take my coconut Colt, but it is like dessert. It is seriously, and it's like the serving size is 2 tablespoons. So it's just like a little strawberry and chocolate are their main flavors. And I just eat it like it really is my dessert. It's very good and high probiotic. Other things are things like kombucha, the water kefir. If you just like any natural food store really has like their whole section of probiotic foods. Now, this is one of those things I used to have to make it all. Like I just used to teach classes for people on how to make this stuff and I just buy it. So honestly, like I just rather buy things rather than have to make them. So like kimchi and sauerkraut as long as they're fresh, not in the can. But lots of diversity in that. And you can really just play with and see what you like. But most people like those chew yogurts because they're sweet and they taste good, but they're not high sugar. So
Cool.
yeah,
And we can feed those to the kids too.
absolutely. Yeah. These are things I
Just
teach
like
and
it's
tell my
sweet.
kids, and
Well, here you go,
here
sweetie.
it is.
I'm a
Yeah.
picky eater and I'm like so concerned about what we're creating in her micro freaking biome right now because it's not good, folks. It's not good. So I'm like, how can I trick this little queen into getting PPPs? You know, like I feel like
Yeah.
every mom is on a mission to try to, right? We're all doing our best trying to like give them more than what they'll just organically eat. And
What they're
but
going to
yeah,
do.
Whole Foods has like a whole back end cap of like
Mhm.
all those foods that you can like the kimchi and the sauerkraut and all that you can just throw into, a sandwich or any bowl. Like that's usually what I do. I
Yeah,
don't
they can
eat
be on
them
side.
enough though. They usually end up going bad in my fridge. So we've got
But
some work.
they last a long time. I mean, that is the beauty of cultured and fermented things, is like they are made by aging. So it's not like it's going to go bad like,
Too quick.
like a banana, right? Like it
True.
can hang out in your fridge for a pretty long time before it's going to be funky. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I wasn't eating it regularly enough. Let's
Yeah.
just say.
Yeah. Just get the regularity in.
Okay, so the PPP, that is for everyone to be left with. The PPP, the protein,
Hmm.
produce, the prebiotics
Probiotics.
to help
Yep.
us manage all these symptoms that we're experiencing.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's like baseline.
Oh, go ahead for a big yes for a
Yeah. No,
healthy
that's
base.
it. I was just going to say that's baseline. Hmm.
Beautiful. Okay, I want to transition into your late diagnosis ADHD because this is another topic that a lot of women in my circle are very curious about, or going through, or navigating through. So, what's been your journey of discovering ADHD, both in yourself and your daughter?
Yeah. So the first thing I'm going to say is that I think there's a lot of growing awareness in women, our age, 40s to 50s, maybe at this point, because there was not a diagnosis that existed for girls when we were children.
Yeah.
So the formal diagnosis, there were two big important parts. One was they said you were going to outgrow it when you hit your adolescence, which we now know is not true. And two, really, they thought it was boys. Like it was just a boy diagnosis. So this was the, boy bouncing off the wall diagnosis when we were kids. This was not a thing that even existed. They would never have thought to look for it in a little girl. And then the presentation is often quite different. So I'm not going to say there aren't hyperactive presentations in females, because there absolutely can be, but it's just like usually a much lower percentage of girls and women are going to have that hyper presentation. So there's more of the either inattentive type, which is the primary thing that we see with women, or a combination of like some maybe hyperactivity. But a lot of times that hyperactivity is happening inside our brains, not like physically being manifested. So the inattentive is what is much more common for women. And that can look like in a classroom, something that to a teacher would be great news. Like the little girl is just very quiet. She's daydreaming. She's doodling in her notebook. She's really just not present to what's happening in the classroom. So again, if I am the teacher and I have the little boy who is bouncing off the walls and running around screaming and disrupting my classroom, and then I have the little girl in the back who's just kind of staring out the window, not causing any trouble, and also kind of presenting as like a good girl because she's been quiet and not causing problems, where's my attention going?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So lots of missed girls,
Yeah.
And so now a lot of times what's happening is moms are seeing these diagnoses happen in their children, and they're going, wait, hold on. I just looked at this questionnaire and I answered all these questions for my kid, but also a lot of these are true for me. So I think that's a lot of what is driving this kind of awareness that's happening for midlife women. The other thing is we do have an additional hormonal component. And like for me personally, like I had been like truly symptomatic my entire life, but I didn't realize it and I didn't have a name for it. And then my symptoms really upticked when I hit perimenopause. Around the same time, my kiddo, the same one who had the apraxia diagnosis, she'd been humming along fine for years. Like I felt like I actually forgot about it a lot, right? Like I didn't think about it unless I was telling someone about her, which would happen maybe twice a year, right? Like it's like this thing that happened a long time ago. She started going through puberty. So I'm going through like reverse puberty. She's going through puberty. Our
What is
hormones are
wrong?
right. Our hormones are like all flared up, and all of a sudden we were both really symptomatic. And so that really heightened. And I was like, what is happening here? And then, long story short, I actually kind of went a backdoor myself. I had run a genetics panel because I was looking at using a new company for my clients for something else entirely. And I ran a genetics panel. And the first thing that popped up was very high probability of ADHD. And it was just like this lightning bolt, like from the sky, where I was like, well, that is fucking true. Like truth to my bones. I hadn't gone to get a diagnosis. I hadn't sought any further anything, but it was just like, well, this is just true. I have to be very clear here. Genetics are not diagnostic criteria for ADHD. So even if you were to see it on a genetic panel, like what I look at, that doesn't mean it's going to be true for you. It's always an intersection between your genetics and environmental things that happen, and do you present or not present. But as soon as I saw that, I was like, yeah, I know I'm going to go through a diagnostic process, but really like, I know this, right?
You felt it.
So, and right around the same time, I had a conversation with someone at my daughter's school. Actually, she wasn't a teacher, but she was someone who had a great relationship with my daughter and had known her since she was itty bitty. And she was having some classroom struggles, which there were other factors involved. I will just say that. But she was having some classroom struggles. And I thought the counsel of someone else who just knows or, knew and loved my daughter. And I was so lucky that we had, outside eyes and someone who had seen her since she was, 4 years old at that school, right? Wow. So hey, I need some help with this. And it was actually just before then, like all of this happened within like 2 weeks. And so she's like, it sounds like maybe she's got some executive function issues. And I was like, I feel like I've heard that word, but I don't really know what that means. And she was like, it's things that are like you would think of as an executive. Like, you can initiate tasks and you can stay organized and you can plan, and you see that when projects are coming due, there's an order of operations to get the project done. I was like, well, yeah, she struggles with all of that. And then of course in my head, I'm like, and so do I. So she actually just handed me a list. It didn't say anywhere on there ADHD, but what it said was executive function challenges, which I now know is one of the primary kind of precursor evaluation strategies is executive function. So she's like, hey, next time you go to your pediatrician, look at this for your kid and bring this sheet in to your pediatrician and have that conversation. So I literally had this list in my purse as I'm like looking at this genetic piece for me, pull out the sheet, and I like see the executive function stuff. I start reading, of course, because one of the hallmarks with ADHD is I can go into hyperfocus mode. So there is the distractibility, but there is also the ability to massively deeply focus when you are super interested in something. So that is the secret superpower of ADHD, is that hyperfocus ability. Now it can be a problem because you can be so hyperfocused that no one can get your attention, like hell or high water. The house could be burning down. And if I'm into something, I'm like, I am in it. So I go hyper focus mode into I have to understand brain function ADHD. Like I just went down and I just started doing massive amounts of research, just like I had done the hyper focus when she was a little tad diagnosed with apraxia, and just started learning about that and learning about executive function stuff, the different presentations in girls, and really just understanding that better. And so I even went through my process mostly because I wanted to be able to show her like, hey, we're in this together, right? Like we're going to go through the process with you so that we could get support from the school and things like that. But really, like, I didn't want her to feel like she was just like, she's the weird one, or there's something quote unquote wrong with her, or there's a problem. I wanted her to have me as a support, not just like as her mom, but like, hey, I actually get it. And I know what it feels like inside your brain. And so, yeah, so we went down that path for both of us. And as I started learning more and understanding more, and with my background and understanding women's hormones, it just made so much sense to me that it's just so different for women and for girls.
Mm-hmm. And so how do you feel the hormonal shifts of like perimenopause exacerbated the ADHD symptom? Or is it the other way around? How does that work?
Yeah. And I think that's another thing that it starts getting heightened. Kind of my analogy for this is if the symptoms have been simmering, all of a sudden they come to a full boil. And it's a lot of it is that regulatory effects, like we were talking about with things like progesterone earlier, right? So one of the things that progesterone does is potentiate GABA, which is another neurotransmitter that's calming. So when we lose out on that, that happens to be another thing that people with ADHD are neurotransmitters. Many people have trouble from a genetic standpoint with regulation of GABA. So there's already a regulation problem with dopamine happening. And then we add on the regulation problem with GABA based on the fluctuation of progesterone. And now it feels a lot worse. And now there's much more of a scattered feeling and a brain foggy feeling. And I kind of couldn't concentrate before, but now like anyone's talking to me and I'm like completely not here. So it just makes things amplified. So those things are kind of already there. There already is a mental energy fluctuation that will happen with a menstrual cycle for any woman. It's already heightened for women with ADHD. And then, wow, it goes into overdrive in perimenopause.
Okay. Oh my God. I'm just imagining you going through all of that as a person, as a woman, as a mother, as your daughter is. And that's just so many things to be juggling and managing internally and externally. So what has been I'm hearing the executive functioning and all of that, but from like a functional nutritionist standpoint, how do we support the women with ADHD through your lens?
So the same baseline things apply, right? So like, are we getting enough protein really to run things? There are foundational assessments that I think are important for every woman that are even more important. So like I was saying earlier, vitamin D is really important. Zinc is a really critical factor. And I'm forgetting the specific research, but it was somewhere like 30% of people, if they got sufficient on zinc, were getting off their stimulant medication. Iron is a really important component for dopamine production. So if a woman is eating low iron, maybe she's vegetarian or vegan or isn't, maybe she has poor gut function and so she can't digest protein very well. Any woman who's anemic, those symptoms are going to be worse. And then same thing like blood sugar. If your blood sugar is all up and down, your energy is going to be all up and down. Your focus is going to be all up and down. So those foundational items are going to be true for everyone. Then there are some pieces like essential fatty acids. So without going super deep in the weeds, there's different kinds of essential fats. So most women listening have probably heard of like omega-3s versus omega-6s. There is not only a much higher need for omega-3s in the brain of someone with ADHD, there are certain kinds of omega-3s that are going to amplify our focus actually and help us feel better. So I look at what is the omega status of a woman. I mean, this is our brain's raw materials, right? Mm-hmm. So yes, how is gut function? We're making all of these neurotransmitters, we're breaking them down in the gut, what's happening with digestion. Thyroid is a huge one. Similarly, like it's a lot of energy production. So if energy production is not good at a systemic level, of course, we're not going to have sufficient energy for the brain. So I'm looking at thyroid function, gut function. Toxins have a huge role to play in hampering our brain's ability to work. So how do we detox? And by detox, I feel like that's a little bit of a tainted term anymore in this world, but our body's just natural ability to handle what's thrown at us. And so if we're putting on a heavier load than we're able to actually remove, there's a natural imbalance there. We do store toxins in fat. Your brain is mostly fat. So we are more likely to get a buildup of anything that's toxic in our brains if we don't have that detox capacity working well. So I can see that on labs. But basically, I'm like, what's functioning in the rest of your body that we can support to help your brain function the best that it can?
Wow. So it seems like it's a similar course of action. It's just even more important when you're going through perimenopause and if you have, anything else going on, right? It's even more important because those symptoms are going to be even more obvious or bigger or louder. So
yeah,
let me make sure I have this straight and then we will wrap up. If someone comes to work with you, you run all these tests in these labs so you can basically see how things are functioning. You can see where we're deficient, and then you're going to help us create a plan, a roadmap, which includes what we should be eating to help us naturally fill those gaps so all these building blocks can build properly so we can be right in mind and body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. So I created a method and I called it a metabolic method. It's MacCarroll metabolic method, but really it's about metabolism is just about using energy. And so your brain needs energy, just like we think about metabolism as like, oh, that person can eat McDonald's and not gain weight. That's not metabolism. So metabolism is just like, how does your body use energy? And so if your brain can access energy and produce energy while you're going to feel better. And then same with your body and your hormones. So there are other things. There are, specific herbs and botanicals and like things we can use to help us to actually just like feel better. And I'm super not above what I call bridge supports, which I think that's what that is, right? So bridge support is like, it's not that root cause, but it's just going to help you feel better right now. Totally down with that. I studied herbalism as well. So I use a lot of botanicals to help people feel better in that process too. But yeah, that's the roadmap.
Amazing. Because now I'm just curious, like, what are my deficiencies? And, because it's like, I know I'm not getting enough zinc and iron and vitamin D and protein and all these beautiful things. I want to wonder why we have all of these symptoms like low energy, brain fog, depressive states, things like that. And I know there's not a one size fits all treatment plan to any single person. I know there's usually a combination of modalities that help people holistically heal and nourish their mind, body, and spirit. But I've just been so passionate about this functional medicine and functional nutrition and all of the missing links that it's so easily grasping at that Western medicine is missing, that are just natural, right? So we can't make any money off selling more spinach or at least pharma can't make any more money off selling more spinach. And so I think, not to overwhelm anybody in the audience, but if you could take one little nugget from this beautiful discussion, right? If you're suffering with any of these symptoms or any of these things that are going on, if you could take one little piece and try it and weave it into your world as a baby step for the next 30 days and journal how you feel before and then journal how you feel after to see if it's working for you, to see if it's helping you function, and then layer in another thing and then layer in another thing. Or you can call Christine and figure out how you can work together. So with that being said, Christine, thank you so much for being here. Will you tell the listeners where they can connect with you, how they can work with you, anything that you've got that they can gobble up?
Yeah, totally. So easy to find. My website is just my name. So just ChristineMacCarroll.com. The podcast has been on pause because I'm actually going to relaunch as a specifically ADHD for women podcast here in the next month or so. But I have 4 years of back content on health and hormones for women. So just about anything that we just talked about, I actually went into depth on one of those podcast episodes of The Bitch Fix. So that is the podcast that you can go download. And I did a whole series about a year ago on subtypes of ADHD, some foundational pieces for women with ADHD. So there actually is that component in there as well. And I've definitely talked about perimenopause and things like that there. And on Instagram, similar, it's just my name. So Christine.MacCarroll, you can find me there too.
Amazing. Yeah, I feel like we are just scratching the surface on this ADHD conversation. And so thank you for being a pioneer in this space and turning what could have been, so much pain with you and your daughter and your family into such purposeful work. And I think people are realizing, oh shit, I needed this diagnosis a long time ago. And it's why I'm struggling with attention or, I'm even thinking like big outbursts, right? When we just get flooded and overwhelmed and we're like, God, that's not me. What's happening? It's like, let's make sure instead of blaming and shaming ourselves, we're starting to get to the root of what's causing some of these things. But thank you so much, Christine, as always, for the work that you do and for being here today. And for you listeners, I will go ahead and invite Christine. Are you on Facebook, Christine?
I am on Facebook. Yeah.
Okay. So I'll invite Christine to the Mommy's Mental Health Matters group. So if you guys have more questions or you want to leverage her as an expert, she'll be in that group. But other than that, I will see you all same time, same place next week. Bye for now.
Thank you so much for listening to the Unperfected Pod. I hope this episode helped you feel a little less alone and a little more inspired to be you. If you like what we're doing here, I would so appreciate that you subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. If you do, share the episode on Instagram and tag me at BrookeJeanUnperfected to enter to win a 1-to-1 laser coaching session. Also, feel free to join me in my private Facebook community, Mommy's Mental Health Matters, where we continue the conversation. Thanks again for being here and see you in next week's episode.